Hello, I'm Lilay. Today we're discussing the book Anne of Green Gables. Why do we discuss this book? We all have moments when things don't go well or as we hoped. So what should we do? Anne's answer is, if you decide to be happy, you'll always find a way to be. Isn't that powerful? The little girl who said this, Anne, looks a bit unusual with her freckled face, red hair, and constant trouble-making. People say that children with red hair are cursed by the devil, just like Anne. It seems that's true, as misfortune has followed Anne like a shadow since her birth. Her parents died of fever when she was just 3 months old. She was later adopted by the impoverished Thomas couple, but sadly they abandoned her in the countryside a few years later, and Anne nearly starved to death. She was then taken in by another woman, but this woman had 8 children. Why did she bring Anne home? To find a little maid to work hard for her children. Despite Anne's abilities, she was sent to the orphanage at 10, which is already tragic enough. One day, 4 months later, Anne received unexpected good news. A brother and sister from Green Gables wanted to adopt her. After many twists and turns, she finally arrived at Green Gables, only to be almost sent away by the owner Marilla. This woman angrily shouted, "You're mistaken. I wanted a boy, not this ugly girl." There's a line in the book that says, "My life is a splendid tomb for burying hope." It's really so bleak. But even in such a situation, Anne was still able to change everything through her efforts. How did she do it? Are you eager to meet Anne? A bit of background, the great Mark Twain read this book. He had been through many trials, and by then he was already battling illness and nearing the end of his life. He was so moved that he wrote to the author L. M. Montgomery saying, "Anne is the most touching and beloved child character since the immortal Alice." The author of this book is Canadian writer L. M. Montgomery, and she wrote it in 1908. This story still feels warm and vibrant today, as if it could melt all the ice in our lives. Anne has indeed touched many people. She gave young Hillary Clinton a lot of courage and inspired J.K. Rowling, author of Harry Potter. This book also popularized a place, Prince Edward Island, in Canada. There, Green Gables has become a tourist destination, attracting many readers who come to see where Anne lived. Prince William of the UK even flew to Prince Edward Island for his honeymoon. He said Anne is Kate Middleton's best friend. If you read the story, you'll find it's mostly about the little details of everyday life with almost no villains. All the forces are transparent, loving, and warm. Anne possesses 2 extremely valuable assets: curiosity about life and an optimistic imagination. So don't see this book just as children's literature about growing up. It's much more than that. After reading this work, I reflect on my relationships with others, think about friendship, respect, trust, and how to communicate with my own children. So I hope families can read it together, and it is indeed a very beautiful book. Let's read a few lines. A breeze stirred the clover field, refreshing and carrying a sweet fragrance. The distant lights of the village flickered through the gaps in the trees. The distant sea endlessly murmured its lullaby, and the western sky was adorned with the brilliant colors of the sunset. The reflection in the lake became increasingly enchanting and soft. And, faced with such beauty, was moved. "Dear world," she whispered, "how lovely you are. I'm grateful to live in your embrace." This is and her attitude is to always have daydreams, regardless of what she experiences, using daydreams to counter a barren and meager life, maintaining surprise and optimism. So this is not just about one person's situation but an Anne-style choice. Let's dive into Anne's story. What kind of place is Green Gables? Outside the house is a huge cherry tree, so close that its branches touch the house. The tree is covered with dense blossoms, leaving almost no leaves visible. On either side of the house are large orchards, one an apple orchard, the other a cherry orchard. The orchard trees are in full bloom, and the grass is dotted with dandelions. In the lower garden, the lilac trees are covered in purple flowers, and their intoxicating sweet scent drifts up to the windows with the morning breeze. This is Green Gables. Unlike other houses in the town, which are friendly built along the main street, Green Gables is located at the end of the cleared land, away from neighboring houses, amidst the fruit trees. It is very beautiful. To outsiders, living in such a place hardly seems like living at all. However, the owners of Green Gables had their own way of enjoying it. Ivy climbs up the east wall of the house, white cherry blossoms bloom in the orchard, and the backyard is lush and green. The owners of the farmhouse are Mr. Matthew Cuthbert and Miss Marilla Cuthbert, a brother and sister who are somewhat eccentric. One is silent and very shy, the other is stern and formal, adhering to etiquette. Even though they have lived in the town for a long time, they are not very social, relying on each other, and remaining unmarried throughout their lives. As time passed, the siblings grew older and found they could no longer handle some tasks. After much consideration, they decided to entrust a middleman to adopt a clever and charming boy from the orphanage to help with some daily chores. Fate had other plans, though. When Matthew drove his carriage to the train station to pick up the child, he found a girl instead. This girl, Anne Shirley, is about 11 years old, with red hair and 2 small braids hanging down her back. Her face is small, pale and thin, covered in freckles with large eyes and a big mouth. Matthew was taken aback and said, "I was supposed to pick up a boy. We need a helper who can work. What's going on here?" It turns out the middleman had sent the wrong message. Anne was not the child the siblings wanted. Matthew felt awkward and couldn't speak for a while. At that moment, Anne came over, extended her hand and said, "You must be Mr. Matthew. I'm so glad to meet you. I was worried you might not come. I was thinking that if you didn't come tonight, I would climb up that big cherry tree over there and wait until dawn. Hiding among the blooming blossoms and sleeping under the moonlight, wouldn't that be romantic?" Matthew clumsily shook Anne's thin little hand and decided to take her home first. He couldn't just leave her there. Anne was quite chatty, chattering all the way back, and Matthew found her talk very interesting. Listening to her chatter brought him an indescribable pleasure, and he was quite inclined to keep her. But back at Green Gables, when Marilla saw her brother had brought home a strangely dressed girl, she strongly opposed and planned to send her back to the orphanage. The siblings had a quarrel. And, having finally understood, said, "You don't want me because I'm not a boy, do you? I imagined everything so beautifully, but no one has genuinely wanted to keep me. If you don't want me, what will I do? I'm going to cry."